management of heat stress in sheep and goats during this season. So you everybody know aware about this. Nowadays, global warming that becomes the major problem for us, and many of the foreign countries that are blaming to us because of our means they are blaming to us our because of our cattle population and buffalo populations. So for that the greenhouse gases that are produced from these animals and this emission of the methane, particularly the methane that emitted from these cattle and all this, but it is not only from this production of the methane from these cattle and the other also the factors that are responsible. So nowadays, scientists they have determined that near about previously they have determined 1.5%. The 1.5 degrees centigrade will be increases up to the 2050. But now that 2 degrees centigrade will be increases in the temperature up to the 2030. So that is very much emerging for us. So for this global warming, there are two regions that are maybe man-made regions and natural regions. Some of these tsunamis and all these the forest fire and man-made this deforestation. Although that are the regions that the most of these gases that are trapped here in this ozone layer, and these the sunlight during the summer season that the ultraviolet rays that are comes out that are trapped by these gases. And nowadays the proportion of the gases that are trapped here in the ozone layer that increases, and the layer of this ozone layer that becomes very thinner. So that's why directly the sun exposure that are on the animals. So animals they are suffering from this the sensible heat loss, and they makes them as a sensible heat loss and insensible heat loss. If this the heat production to the animals is equals to the heat loss, then that may be easy for them to susceptible or that come back to the environment temperature. So the small ruminants nowadays in our Indian continents that the tropical area where these sheep and goats are produced for the meat purpose only. But here sometimes here you see here in this Rajasthan, the state the sheep are also produced for this milk purpose and mostly for the wool purpose. So this and also the meat purpose here also in Telangana state the sheep and goats that are also produced these rearing for this milk and these wool purposes. So the small ruminants that are exposed to the wide range of the stressors that are under the thermal stress, maybe nutritional, exercise, management, and also the diseases, different diseases that outbreaks comes out, and this predation from these large size animals. So this that stresses that redistributed the body resources, including this protein and energy, at the cost of their decreased growth rate, reproduction rate, production, and health of the animals. So more often the goats are reared for production of the meat, but they also serve as a ready source for the milk and this meat for these families' demand. So in our India, that goat constitute 26.40% to the total livestock population, and present status goats in our country that are 148.88 millions. So according to the 20th livestock census report, our country has near about 74.26 million sheep, and which contributes near about 13.87% of the total sheep population in our India. Because this goat that is called as the poor man's cow, because it is the business of 70% of the poor peoples, women, educated, unemployed, small landholders, laborers, and landless peoples that is in the rural area. They are doing this business because of this requirement of this money, and this the land is not there, so you can also do this business. So in sheep and goat, if the rearing is that the fodder availability will be there, proper fodder and proper health status will be there, then these animals will parturate 3 times in 2 years. So you everybody aware about this, these animals are the small ruminants, that sheep and goats that have not any religious restriction. So if you rear for these the animals that these have a restriction, but sheep and goat meats that is very much delicious, and they are they are contributing more our profit. So good quality mutton, churn, milk, manure, and skin and wool also are obtained from these sheep and the goats also. This contributes the skin of these animals, everything from this sheep, intestine of the sheep that becomes the cord. We can make the catguts, and also the every part of these small ruminants that is utilized by our industry, and that is giving profit to our small marginal farmers. So here I am just reported that the space required, because this is very important. If you do this business, then kids having the space required and how much the maximum number of the animals that can be reared in that space. Say height of this shared feeding space and water space also, that should be there. Adult female, that may be the 12 to 16 square feet. That may be 60 animals that can be reared and pregnant, and that 20 square feet that require more space. So this is the space required for this water feeding and animal space. So I'm coming toward the heat stress, because I'm also working in the area heat stress. I have done my PhD in that area in the NDRI kernel. So stress, that is the non-specific response of the body to any type of the demand. So heat stress results from a negative balance between the net amount of energy that flowing from the animal's body to its surrounding environment. So animals, when they eat, that may be the protein, carbohydrate, fats. That should be their production will be the metabolizable energy, and that energy, that the feed that converted to the metabolism energy, then production of that heat in the animal's body, that should have to dissipate. If the temperature of the surrounding area or environment or the ambient temperature is higher than the production of this temperature, then animals have to cope up for this outside temperature. So they have to change they have to change like the temperature of this outside. So they change their behavior. So they are the environmental factors and animal factors particularly responsible for the heat stress, that sunlight, thermal radiation, air temperature, relative humidity, air movement, warm movement, animal factor, that species to species that may be variable in the for the heat stress, metabolism rate, how much is the metabolic heat productions, and the thermoregulatory mechanisms that these animals have a different type of the sweat glands, and these sensible heat loss and insensible heat loss, that may be the how the painting maybe works. So the intergovernmental panel on climate change, that the IPCC projects that the 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade increase in the global warming in the 21st century, meaning that the heat stress will continue to affect the sustainability of the livestock farms worldwide. It is that the heat stress is not only affect our Indian continent, but it also affects the world. That is the very challenge to us, that the how to control the increase in the temperature. So stress is described that with the cumulative detrimental effect of variety of factors, different factors that may be causing on the health and performance, and that means that health and these body's growth performance of the, that may be the scientists that studied this. So animals undergo various kind of stresses that I also discussed this, the physical, nutritional, chemical, psychological, behavioral stress, and that the heat stress. So among these, all these type of the stressors, the heat stress is the major, and your changing climatic scenario, that the changing the climatic scenario of that maybe scientists that worked on this. So heat stress is the pursued discomfort and physiological strain that associated with the exposure to the extreme and hot environment. So heat stress may be that affected. So it is maybe the summer state nowadays, the climate change is there, and anytime there is a raining is there, and this temperature may be increase or decrease. So that we can't say that the summer is only the responsible. But nowadays in the rainy season also, there may be the extreme humidity that also causes the stress or discomfort to the animals. So that the climate change and multiple, I have already discussed this multiple environmental stresses that directly affect the animals. High temperature, that the high temperature photo period, that may be the animals that are the short day breeders animals, so their photo period, that changes will be there, that there will be the ultimately affect to the animals. Rainfall I also discussed, and indirectly that the animals may be affected by the different type of the diseases that occurrence, less feed and water, that is also the major problems for us. Low grazing land is availability here. More number of the animals that may be there, but this grazing land is less. So that ultimately affects the livestock production, and ultimately that affects our economic constants to our means our India. That ultimately the economy of our India that may be affected by this the direct and indirect effect of this climate change. So regarding to the science of heat stress, so different we have already discussed that the first science that if the animals under the stress that respiration may be increases. First the science that maybe respiration increases, and that may be the normal respiration that goes to up to the 40 to 50, and the rectal temperature that the normal rectal temperature in case of these periods, but this also goes toward the 105 degree Fahrenheit. So that may be increase 105, 106, that may be increases. So this creates a cascading effect on biological functioning. So you know that the circadian rhythms or that rhythm that may be daily 24 hours rhythms our working with our routine working functions. But this disturbs that, including there is a difference in the feed intake, feed efficiency, and even affecting the water content, protein, energy, and mineral balances in the body. Our enzymatic reactions, hormonal secretions, and our blood metabolites that may be affected, and that ultimately reduce the performance of the animals. That in the play in this the performance may be the meat and this wool performance and milk performance that may be decreased. So heat stress leads to the impairment in the body growth, physiology, morphology, blood biochemistry also affected. These reproductions, production, milk yield, as well as this immunity of these animals, natural immunity that may be the small ruminants across the world that the heat stress that causing or impairment may be there in the morphology, biochemistry, reproduction, and also milk yield. So I already discussed that the intense solar radiations means our ozone layer is becoming thin. I just visited Australia, and there is I heard from Australia that the ozone, there is a hole in the ozone. So that's why there is a sun burning cases maybe there in the Australian continents, and the intense solar radiation because of this thinning of this ozone layer, and this amount of the gases or greenhouse gases that may be higher. So that causes the intense solar radiation that may be directly affecting the animals, and that heat stress may be there. And this after this heat stress that there is a physiological changes, biochemical changes, and there are the some of the molecular changes that may be there we have seen. So physiological, so animal first there is a behavioral changes that may be are there. So these behavioral changes that lying time, urination, that defecation that may be decreases, these defecation, urination, and lying time, and increase in the water intake capacity, drinking frequency that may be increases in the behavioral and hematological parameters, our hemoglobin percentage, that the PCV, total erythrocytes, total leukocyte counts, all these increases during this stress condition. And important vital signs or physiological responses that the skin temperature, heart rate, pulse rate, respiration rate, that also increases, but the rumination that may be during this stress condition, the animals can't ruminate properly. Then when it comes towards the biochemical changes, in the biochemistry that there is an increase in the cortisol level because of the first stress, the hormones cortisol that may be increases, and after this the adrenaline or adrenaline levels also increases, thyroxine hormones, serum urea creatine that may be increased, and in the decrease in the level of T3 T4, that plasma total proteins, albumin, plasma antioxidants levels that may be decreases. And going towards the molecular study, cellular study, that upregulation of this heat shock protein, I have worked in the stress condition that the heat shock protein 70 that may be increases because it requires for these cellular during the stress condition that directly affect the cellular levels, and that cellular remodeling, that HSP will be the first gene that increase, and that shows that there is a stress condition. Nitric oxides genes also IL-6, CRP protein also increases liver functionings, that B1, MAPK, ATPase, and ATPase also that genes that increases during these molecular cellular levels. and down regulation of these the vascular and epithelial growth factors and the leptin hormones that may be down regulated during this heat stress, means physiologically, biochemically, and cellular levels there may be the affection of this heat stress will be shown. My senior, that Shajan sir, that worked on that, and that he told that environmental stress that directly affect the brain, that the target brain that affects the hypothalamus pituitary axis, directly the cell, heart, lung, liver, skin, thyroid, blood. That are the organs that directly environmental stress may be affected. And simultaneously, during the heat stress, that the animal have to cope up for these changes. Animals have to make themselves suitable for the changes in the environmental stress. So that's why there may be the behavioral responses during that may be related with the hypothalamus, that decrease in the feed intake will be there, water intake will be increases, and animal seeking towards the shade, changing their posture. And also in the neuroendocrine responses, animals, there is the hypothalamus and the ASP axis, that may be the CRS level increases, hormones, ACTS will be also there, cortisol level that may be there, TSH and adrenaline vasopressin also there may be increases, that the neuroendocrine responses. Cellular level molecular, I just told that the HSP may be increases, and these physiological responses, RR, PR, RT, and ESR, skin temperature, that also increases. So animal have to make themselves the sustainable for this environmental stress, and this particular behavioral, neuroendocrine, molecular response, physiological response, metabolic response, and biochemical responses that may be there cope up with this, and animals have to sustain for this environmental stress by changing these parameters. So here that these the hypothalamus pituitary axis that directly affects the hypothalamus and the pituitary adrenocorticotropic hormones, cortisol will be higher. But because of this negative energy balance, so during the heat stress or any type of the particular type of the stress, that may be perturbation stress, any type of the stress, the animal goes in the negative energy balance. So animals need more energy for their production and for their growth, but that the demand of this energy will not be achieved by these animals, so that animals goes in a heat stress condition, because here in the heat stress, that the diameter intake of these animals that may be also reduced, and these the physiological responses that increases, and that may be milk production also that may be decreases. So you everybody, that our Indian continents, we are, because of this temperature also, we are rearing all these our sheep and goats, because these animals are homeothermic animals. They have to maintain themselves for this constant environmental temperature. What may be there, that may be changes. So they have tried to maintain their body temperature. So the thermoneutral zone for that animals, the sheep, that 12 to 30 degrees centigrade, that may be thermoneutral, because it is a worldwide sheep are produced there, and our Indian, that 12 to 24 degrees centigrade, that may be the thermoneutral temperature that Mistra and that co-workers that studied on that. So heat stress occurs in animals when there is an imbalance between the heat production within the body and its dissipation. I just told how much amount of the heat produced by the animals by eating this carbohydrate, protein, fatty diet, and this heat production will be there, amount of the heat increment in the body, that should be have to animal have to dissipate. So if the animal is not dissipate this by this the sensible heat loss by conduction, convection, and radiation, so then animal goes towards the sweating, that may be the evaporation through the skin, and that may be the, if the sweating is not proper or not functioning, then animal goes toward the panting, that evaporation through the respiratory area, that this panting. So animals have to they balance their heat production and heat dissipation, so then then the animals that may be a comfort animals. So thermal imaging here, my colleague Dr. Dongre, that is working on this thermal imaging camera, that in the artificial intelligence projects. So heat stress that directly the measure that the temperature in the head region that may be increases. So ultimately there may be the also the water intake will be increased, and animal goes in the negative energy balance. All these parameters that may be the physiological parameters will be increases, but the reproductive performance, glucose levels that may be decreases, milk production, other health that may be also decreases, body weight gain that may be decreases, and amount of energy, because the animals that goes in a negative energy balance, then the for filling this gap, that the negative energy balance have to be maintained. So maintenance energy requirement will be higher, and dry matter intake will be less. So that's why the animals is suffering from this heat stress condition. So also the here in this there is a combined stress, that heat stress and nutritional stress, because these heat stress directly affect these physiological responses or changes, and these other health and these reproductive parameters. Also the nutritional stress will be there, because of heat stress animals can't eat the feed properly, and the net energy that required to the animals that may be uh, the demand of this energy is more, but in that may be not fulfilled by these animals. So that's during that condition, the nutritionally, that if you see study the glucose and this NEFA, that may be important for that. During that conditions, the level of this NEFA that may be decrease, and the glucose level also decreases in the negative, because there is a nutritional stress also. So here important animals in the nutritional way, that these rumen microbes, there may be the changes in the diet, because not animal is a nutritional stress, that animal is not taking the proper diet. There may be the changes in the ruminal microflora, and this production of these volatile fatty acids in the rumen, that the acetate propionate butyrate, that the acetate level will be butyrate level will be increases, and the propionate and these total volatile fatty acids that may be decreases, and also that alters ultimately the negative, that the deprived nutrition, that ultimately production of this methane production will be higher. That's why the foreign countries blame us, you are not supported to give diet of this proper good fiber digestion fiber, or they are blaming us to, you are not giving the proper diet to the animal. That's why your country's animals that are producing more methane and contributes to the global warming. So here, because of this deprived in the nutrition, so that the ruminal microflora that may be changes, and more amount of this methane production will be there, and ultimately the ruminal volatile fatty acid production also changes. So HI, that is our thermal comfort, we have to measure by the scales. Here that is the relative humidity and this degree centigrade. So that if you know the relative humidity and this temperature, so you can measure the THI of the animal. So THI higher above than the 72, that mild stress, only there will be the somewhat changes in the milk yield. But THI goes to the 75, that milk yield and also reproduction will be affected. And THI that may be 72 to 82, that severe stress. And if THI goes around this 80 to 82 and above, so there may be the decline, or there may be the chances of the death of the animal. So the THI, that is very, very important to do. That is our that index that may be very important to know this stress of the animals, or for our milk production and this meat production. So here indicator of the heat stress have just here painting score. Also, you may calculate the painting score from the animals, because during this season here in the months normal phase, there may be the in the February months, and in the May 1 to 15 that may be 2.9, and in the severe heat stress phase 16 May to 31st May, that may be the severe that may be the these index that are these the Pentic score will be higher during the May month. So here in that May, 15 May above to 31st May, that is important to take care of the animals, because here majority of the animals that 15 May to 31st May, more heat stress will be there, and animals are cope up with these that are not sufficient to make themselves was suitable or the comfort for their zone. So that's here major care of these nuance, and these sheep and goats will be and pregnant animals that should be there. So heat stress behavior increase the standings of the animals, decrease diameter, crowding at water troughs. So if you see during that the major here heat stress behavior, if you see the animals that are crowding at the water trough, then increased water intake, bunching to shake shit from the sheep, increased respiratory. That are the behavior of the animals that may be changes during the higher severe heat stress. So this condition in the 15 May to 31st May, that is severe for us, and most taking care of that particular animals should be there. My senior surgeons and co-workers that have in 2018 that worked on the elevated ambient temperature on growth, milk production, meat production, and immune response that may be reduced to 12%, 3 to 10%, and 4% for growth, milk, and meat production in case of this goat. Goats start experiencing heat when they were exposed to 38 degrees centigrade and above the with THI. So start experiencing with heat stress. That surgeons are also work that, and these above the THI 75, that goat starts experiencing the heat stress. So increased temperature and higher relative humidity in summer can impair the thermal regulatory mechanism of small ruminants and influence the loss of heat, which leads to the heat stress. That is important. So we have to take care during the summer seasons. So our major motto for this in the small ruminants to the production of the meat. So impact of heat strain on meat production, that is very much important for us, because the small marginal farmers, they are rearing these animals for the production of the meat, and by taking money from that. So heat stress acts as an aberrant effect on meat production and the goat's carcass characteristics. So that heat stress that mostly affects that the carcass production, carcass characteristics, and the meat production. That has him work and co-workers that 2013 they worked on that, and says that the heat stress that affect the carcass characteristics. Archana, 2018, she worked and increased the pH shear force in the meat of heat stress Usmanabadi goats, which significantly hamper the tenderness and juiciness in the meat. She worked on the Usmanabadi goats, and she reported that there may be the increase in the shear force in the meat, transverse position in the meat, that force will be increases, and that ultimately affects the tenderness and juiciness in the meat of this goat. So impact of heat stress on reproduction. So not only does the heat impact the overall health of the animals, but heat that may be stress can also be detrimental to the reproductive success of the flock or herd. Directly, not in single animals that may be affected, but ultimately those heat stress that may be affected to the total flock or the herds. Both the male and female reproductive systems are at the risk jeopardy that during the excessive heat conditions. So both these male that may be the ram or the bucks, and doe and nanny that may be the ewe and does that may be the affected during this heat stress, and that affect the reproductive status. It can have a detrimental impact on the sperm production and this sexual desire that in the ram or buck, and also affect the embryo survival and fetal development in the ewes and does. So it also that stress that may be impact on the libido, and that may be the sperm production, and ultimately affects these in case of the females that embryo survival and fetal developments. So here also that heat stress that the directly affect the estrogen level, estrous cycle length, and sexual behavior that may be decreases, oocyte quality, that the embryo production and embryo quality, and ultimately the fertility in the animals that may be decreases by this the heat stress. So that's why the major is care of the animals during the heat stress for this, because this reproduction point of view, because this the animals that should be reproduced and produces the 2 or 3 kids or these lambs that are the profitable for the small marginal farmers. So maintenance of testicular temperature below core body temperature, that is required, because these testicles that are very much important here in these animals, and this maintenance of this temperature that should be there. So Nakvis are also studied that heat stress significantly influence the estrus duration of this estrus cycle, that may be also significantly affected by this heat stress. Ewes also submitted to the heat stress condition recorded a decrease in plasma estradiol and an increase in the plasma progesterone. So Indu and co-workers in 2015 that was she works on the heat stress, and that the ewes that are contact with the heat stress that decreases the concentration of the plasma estradiol hormones, and that there may be the increase in the plasma progesterone. So it ultimately the estrogen level will be decreases, and that the estrous cycles will be that may be influenced. So effect of heat stress on body growth. So here importance because the body growth of the animal that should be proper. Otherwise, there may be the loss of this economy. So exposure of the sheep to elevated temperature results in a decrease in body weight, average daily gain, and growth rate. It also alters the body condition. Sir also works in 2010, and it that says the heat stress affect the body condition score in the youths. I worked on that heat stress that during the biometrical parameters I studied here. The body length, chest girth, height at withers, body weight in Usmanabadi goats. And I have conducted experiment during the summer season. I have these worked on these Usmanabadi goats and Deccan sheep here. And here in the farm, our farm, and also I have conducted research on the field animals. So I have here reported that the most of these heat stress that may be affected in both the type of these conditions, in the farm condition also and in the field condition also, the biometrical parameters that may be affected by this heat stress. So here that the record of body weight. So here body weight should be proper. I told you because there's the body weight that should be special for us. That should be proportionally, that increase in the body weight should be there, because for these small marginal farmers or the large farmers, so that the main aim of this business is to to get the income or the profit. So here this body weight of the animal that should be proportionally increases. So particularly here that the after 15 days of the animals during the summer season, that more concentration gives toward the kids or the lambs. So I just told blood parameters that the heat stress also affects the biochemical composition of the blood. In shape, it causes a reduction in blood volume, means amount of the blood volume in the animals that may be decreases also, and decrease in the white blood cells count, concentration of total protein, glucose, cholesterol, total lipid, calcium, inorganic phosphorus, magnesium, all these parameters that may be in the blood that may be decreases during the heat stress. Concentration of these calorogenic hormones, thyroid, growth hormone, catecholamines, and glucocorticoids that may be also here changes. So this is the causes, means what are the factors that are responsible, that are ultimately affects the body's growth or the body's performance. Now we are comes toward the heat stress elevation, means what are the measures that we have to follow to elevate the heat stress from that during the summer season, mostly the summer season. That so here first provision of physical modification of the environment. So here physically modified the environment means we have to go toward the provision of the shade, then sprinkling of the water and cooling ponds and this white pentel metal sheets on the shade. So this the ultimately the modification in the environment means shade. If you have not so much money, you can the different type of the shades are extensive housing will be there, intensive housing will be there, semi-intensive, depleter housing, different type of the housing systems are there for the housing of the animals. So depending upon the income or money that you can make this housing to the animals. So then nutritional, coming to the nutritional management. So frequently there should be the summer stress that the animals are in the stress, that the nutritional management is very much important. So frequent feeding, decrease in the forage concentration, low fiber diet will be there, fat supplementation should be there, because fat supplementers that major energy source during the heat stress period. So feed additives, you can add different additives to the feeds that gives the concentration in the feeds. Fresh and cool water and antioxidants should be added, vitamin E, selenium that should be added to the feed. And ultimately there will be the genetic selection of the animals. So here if this not works properly, then you go towards the genetic selection of the animals. So by studying the genes of these animals, that the animals can be prostrate to the thermotolerant animals, and thermotolerant animals that may be the animals may be that crossbred, and this stress may be resistant by these animals. So these are the different methods of heat stress elevations. So small ruminant producers or small marginal farmers to overcome the negative effects of heat stress, including the use of the shades, feeding and grazing strategies, providing water, handling time, the use of the fans and evaporative cooling, and site selection of animals housing. Means that is the important factors that are related with the elevation of the heat stress by these, that should be keep in mind by these small ruminant producers or the owners. Shade, that is the easiest method to reduce the impact of high solar radiation. It is applicable under extensive conditions. So if the animals, I just visited the Australia and I have seen 4,000 sheep are the merino sheep are there, and in the 3 seasons, that is summer, winter, and rainy season, all the sheep are in the extensive type of these means they are only in the grazing in the pasture land and also there, but they have provided there there is not the shade is there. There are trees are there and water troubles, water drops are placed there for this need. So that shade is important. The minority of the sheep and goat flocks are permanently housed, while the most of them are housed during the night time and periods in which grazing is not feasible. So the scientists have worked. So providing sheep and goats access to the shade leads to improvement in weight gain, milk production, and reproductive performance, and allows the reduction in the rectal temperature and respiration rates. So these are the providing the better shade, that access to the these breeds that important for production in the weight gain, milk production, and the reproductive performance of that animals will be increased. So the site selection of animal housing, that is the fundamental to decrease the exposure and minimize the effect of heat stress. So surgeons have word that these housing selection site means which site you have to select for this preparation of the house for the animals. So proper selection of the housing site to emphasize factors for enhancing heat dissipation, that minimal radiations, air temperature and humidity, and maximal air velocity will have a long-term protection benefit. So if you go for this proper selection of the housing, that will be there minimal radiation, temperature, humidity, and maximal, that will be the air velocity will be there. So fully enclosed shelters, the shelters that may be fully enclosed are not recommended for hot climate because of the decreased natural air velocity. Therefore, it is preferred to use partially enclosed shelters. So that may be the air velocity will be there. So that children and corpus that studied that fully enclosed shelters are not recommended. That may be there may be the not this wind velocity will be the air should not be proper, ventilation will not be there. So that these the housing should be, if you keeping in mind that the selection of the site for the housing, that is very much important, because proper aeration and ventilation should be there. So provision of the simple shade with low cost housing materials is enough for sheep and goat for its optimal production efficiency. Shade with mud floor are suitable for most of the parts of the country, except where high rainfall is observed. The shades will be considered in elevated area. Fodder trees can be grown. That is important because some of the animals that want to go under the fodder trees. So fodder trees that should be there. Shed should be constructed with proper ventilation. Wall of the shed should be free from cracks or holes while construction. So this is the requirement of the shades. That should be proper shade should be there for this housing of these animals for protecting from the direct sunlight. So these animals, if you see here, during the sunlight exposures, they are seeking toward the shade, and that in the side they are seeking toward the shade, because that this direct sun exposure that affect these or affect the animals, that's the protect the animals that should be there from this hot temperature. So housing that the animals that regularly clean, dry the animal shed should be there. Housing that shed should be, because there are otherwise there will be the infestations of the on the animals that may be there. Then comes to the nutritional management. So ration modification. Waste in 1999 that studied that ration modification can greatly help in reducing the negative effect of heat stress, and these adjustment may include changes in the feeding schedule. Ration modifications means that there will be the changes in the feeding schedules, because in the hot period or during the summer season, during the afternoon period or this stress period, the animals will eat help in reducing the negative effect of heat stress. So feeding at cool hours, feeding intervals. So grazing time and ration composition such as dietary fiber adjustment. The use of high quality fiber forage, increase energy density, supplemented protected fat, and use of the feed additives, buffer, sodium bicarbonate, niacin are also the antioxidants that may be used. So during summer, the feeding behavior for most of the animals changes and they tend to consume more feed during the cooler period of the day. So during the summer that we have to change our feeding schedule, we have to give during the cooler period. So nutritional management here, feeding animals during the cooler periods that encourages them to maintain their normal feed intake and prevents the co-occurrence of peak metabolic and climatic heat load. Grazing, provision of shade and clean water within the grazing area. So here means where the animals that are provided in the pasture land, that should be clean water should be available. Grazing during the evening or during the cool hours. In estimate, animals decrease their grazing time and spend more time in the shade. So in during the summer season, so animals that are generally they are because of this summer stress that the animals are not grazing during the warmer period and that only they are seeking towards the shade, and during the cooler period they want to feed. They graze during the period of the milder weather. Careful ration modification during heat stress are important in achieving. So Agarwal and Upadhyay in 2013 also worked on in India. They have worked on careful modifications in the heat stress, means modification in the ration or nutrition management that maybe reduces the heat stress. Salama and Kovacus 2012 that studied that dairy goats supplemented with 4% fat during summer had a lower rectal temperature. Soybean oil fed to the goats kept the goat under heat stress and increased the milk fat content. So this nutritional management that should be there important for decreasing the heat stress. So feeding of crop residues and high moisture agro-industrial byproducts, tree fodders, oils, whatever available, that should be in the small margin farmers because that are not sufficient to give the amount of the concentration and this. So this whatever you have, then you can feed to the animals. Supplementation of buffers to the supply the higher dietary sodium and potassium level that may be again required during the summer for lactating ruminants. So antioxidants such as vitamin C, vitamin E, that are the body defense because during the metabolic stress conditions that these antioxidants levels will be that the oxidations will be there and reactive oxidant species that may be higher. So these antioxidants, if you supplement in the feed, that are important for reducing these oxidant activity and that works as a scavengers for the body. So the dietary supplementation with 50 mg per kg of vitamin E and 0.3 mg per kg of selenium during the summer improved the sheep reproductive performance and also the lamb growth. Means the nutritional management and supplementation of these feed additives and also these vitamin C and selenium and chromium also that may be important to reducing the heat stress. So this is one thing important for this during that times in the summer seasons, animals are in a strict stress conditions. If you keep these bricks, mineral bricks, their animals they've forgotten they are in the stress and they that maybe the like the mineral salts are there. They are leaking these bricks. So due to this activity, animal relieve their stress. So this activity also very important for this relieving the heat stress in these small ruminants. So these for leaf eaters, generally these browsing animals that is if you hanging these branches of the trees that may be the as a feed into these shade that the animals they want to feed want to eat that the branches of these trees and that relieve the stress. So this is also the one of the activity that also help for reducing the stress in case of these animals. Then important watering provide that the ad libitum clean and drink waters that should be there. Design the water troughs or containers large depending upon the size of the depending upon the animal numbers. The water trough should be larger and fix the troughs containers firmly that the location of the water. One thing is that the location of the water where you have keep the water in the pasture land or this grazing. So location of the water that should know animals should know because that may be helpful for the animals to relieve the heat stress. So drink the ad libitum amount of the water should be provided, and animals should not be made to walk long distance for water. Animals that should be the water should be placed nearby the animals, that should not be long keep in a long distance. That is the agricultural victoria that produces. So provide plenty of clean, cool, and fresh water. That is the paramount to preventing heat stress in small ruminants. So here that is the irrespective of the season. That is not is summer that requires the more amount of the water, but irrespective of the season, you have to supply the clean and this plenty of the water. So that should be there. So that the animals means the sheep and goat that will have near about 2 gallons of the water. That means 7 to 8 liters. That may be increases lactating females. That may be normal. This is normal. Lactating females will drink even more waters. So the watering should be kept given that may be clean and cool waters that should be provided to the animals. Then handling of the animals should be kept minimum. So during the summer stress, animals we are already in a stress condition. So you have to not handle many times that animals. So handle will be during the early morning or late evening. You have to handle the animals. So afternoon work should be avoided when body temperature is already high. So cooling sheep and goats by spraying could reduce the heat stress symptoms. So direct wetting of the animal is often used as an emergency measure and can be effective protective measure that should be followed. And spread and ventilated heat stress goats for 1 hour per day. So if you the spraying of this water or that may be proper ventilation will be there, that consume more feed, more water, and produce more milks. That should be studied by this Darkan, and that the more amount of the water that should be if you spray down the animals, that this increase in the feed consumption, water, and this the milk production also increases. Then important because our in rural area, the most of the small farmers are that are transported to the animals to the market during the irrespective of the season. So transport of the animals should be planned in such a way to avoid the climatic extremes like compromise the animals' welfare. So during the summer season, during the hotter period of the day, the animals should not be transported. Animals should be transported only during the cooler hours of the day. While resting, park the vehicles in the shade. So if there is a resting, that the animals should not be vehicles should not be parked in the summer stress condition. That should be parked in the that should be shade. And duration of the stop. Duration of the stop should be kept to a minimum to avoid the buildup of heat within the vehicle while it is stationary. That should be there. So then again, culling. So because of the unproductive animals or the aged animals, the animals should be culled because that may be the very much that decreases our productive efficiency or production performance, or that may be the productive losses to the economy of our farmers. So the culling should be there. Ultimately, the heat stress that affected the health of the animals, that the proper vaccination should be there, and that these food bath of the animals should be there, and this potassium permanganate that should be there, because there may be during the eating of this dry fodder, that may be the irritation or that may be the injury to the mouth. So potassium permanganate mouth should be there. Regular checkup should be done by the veterinarian, and vaccination should be done without fail for these different type of these diseases, PPR, FMD, TB, heat stress, and the pox, SIBGO, and goat pox vaccination should be there regularly. That should be practiced. Deworming that should be important. The disinfectant that should be important. That should be 8 weeks. That and after the every 3 months, that deworming should be practices. Shearing during the summer, that is important. Sheep and goats that should not be sheared in extreme heat. So wool protect sheep from the extreme heat as well as the extreme cold. A thick fleece is mostly immune to the temperature change due to the insulating properties. So that shearing practices in case of the mostly the sheep that should not be carried out during the summer season. That will protect to the animals during the summer also, and also the winter from insulation. Cooling apparatus that may be installed this here in the shade, that cooling apparatus that should be installed during the summer stage, that is relieving the heat stress to the animals. Genetic selection, I have just this that the gene selection that should be the thermotolerant and agroecological zone specific breeds that should be prepared, and that these resilient genotypes and incorporation of the stress tolerant genes to the animals that should be carried out. That may be the helpful for this the thermotolerance in the animals. So here that in our India, that Shiroi, Jakrana, Jamnapuri beetle, Koilwadi, Jhalwadi, Kuchi, that are the large size breeders and that are the most thermotolerant breeds of the goats. And here that the Magra breed of sheep had the highest overall adaptability. Magra breed of in the Bikaner area, that these sheep have the how overall adaptability will be higher. So here in Telangana, I think that these Usmanabadi goats are prominent breed that in the Telangana, and that because this is a very tough building, and this because of giving kids that may be the better choice for this in the goat production. Nellore Brown and Nellore Jodapi, that will be the also that may be rears in case of the heat tolerance that may be the breeds in case of the Telangana state. And that again the molecular adaptive responses, I just told this by studying these thermotolerance, that genes are also incorporated and making them thermotolerance that may be there. So molecular study that may be also there by studying these SOD genes, nitric oxide genes, and then making the animals thermotolerant to the environments. So that's this gene level study that may be carried out and making this type of the animals that may be thermotolerant to our Indian culture. What to do when you see the stress animals? So these are the stress animals during summer. So if you see that the animals that the shaded area with the air movement should be there, hydrated by offering them clean, cold, and fresh water. Electrolytes balance should be disturbed during the dehydration, so that the animals should be keeping the animals in the shade, and also these drinking water that should be there. If you see the animals in the space conditions, so here. Good practices to be followed for better growth and production in sheep and goats. There are the different stages of the animals. Proper care and management of the animals during that seasons, that should be important for the better performance and better growth. So better performance and better growth, that the animals should be stages of the animals there, that the management of these animals that should be carried out by these up to the stages of the animals as per their changes that should be needed. So this is the managemental practices that everybody should know as a veterinarian, that this will help to the animals. That is the managemental practices that should be followed. This is also these managemental practices that should be got half an hour. That should be colostrum that should be fed to the animal. So this is important. Some of the breeds of our goats and the sheep that gives the kids, that more number of the kids that given. So ultimately there may be the less milk than during that conditions. You have to possible that externally that you can feed to the animals by these bottle fed animals. So this is one of the best criteria that followed during those animals. So this is a rearing of the animals. I just told that extensive system of the rearing, that is very much important, that may be followed in the, if the large number of the animals are there, that in the Australia, that merino sheep are that are this type of the farmings will be there, and this there is a rotational, that the rotational grazing method that may be followed. There may be the different compartments that may be they have prepared and powder that may be grown, and there's that every compartment that may be the rotational grazing methods that may be followed during the extension type of this system. Then semi-intensive, that 3 to 4 means half of the hour that animals that may be in the shade, and half of the animals, the half of the hour that are the animals that may be in the grazing systems. Those is this system also that may be followed, that may be, but the feed cost that may be increases. So the intensive system, that the zero grazing, that is the stall feeding method. So generally our aim, that is the zero grazing systems. So that this stall fed method, that is also important. Less feed requirement is there, that no the less space that's sufficient for more number of the animals. That is the important system of this rearing of these animals, that intensive systems. Rearing in mud floor, that this is also one of the systems of rearing that should be constructed in elevated area and prevent water stagnation. That should be there, that should be followed. Then deep litters shade, that the groundnut husk, sugarcane tops that may be spread, and these animals that may be placed here. That is again one of the, but they are taking care that during the rainy seasons, that maybe if the rain is there, that then there may be changes in production of the ammonia will be there. That elevated floor shed, that elevated this system of the rearing, that if you see that the animals may be reared by these systems, that is very much important, and that may be proper ventilation should be there. This but this is the costliest method for the rearing of these animals. So this elevated floor shed method, that may be also, but here less labor requirement are there. Thank you.